Welcome to the Market Mindset. We are the hub for news, results, and CEO interviews focusing the junior commodities sector. We provide market analysis and perspective that will help position you for solid returns. If that sounds like something you're interested in, you can help support us by liking this video, subscribing to our channel, and clicking the notification bell. For more info, you can visit our website. All links are in the description below. Now let's get into today's video.
Morning, everyone. It's Andrew with the Market Mindset. It's a real pleasure to catch up with Robert Rohlfing, who's the chairman of the board, as well as CEO over at Desert Mountain Energy. It's always a pleasure to catch up with you. And just, I've learned that we jump into conversations very quickly, and I want to do a little bit of a back step here and remind people that one of the most exciting things that I get to do, as well as to identify like mispriced or scarce elements, metals, materials, that are not getting covered or that are so critical for all our flashy technology needs. And right now we live in a lot of chaos, but we also live in a time of absolute wonder and marvel, and ingenuity is important today. And that's what we're talking about with helium and some of these noble gases as well, is that these high-tech coolants are really part of that foundation of creating this new future, this new vision of the world. And that is what Desert Mountain Energy does, is exploration and development of high-grade helium. That's your first kind of pace, but they also have many noble gas properties involved in the southwest here of the US, including, and certainly not excluding, hydrogen, which came as a big hydrogen field. So I just wanted to kind of let people know that's the background. That's what Desert Mountain Energy is about, amongst many other things. And then maybe now we can jump into the conversation with Robert to see where we're at today. And maybe you can kind of give us a little bit of the background, the history from COVID starting onto what we have today. And for those that are new.
Well, thank you, Andrew. I appreciate that. Yeah, starting back with, we've come such a long ways in a very short time span. And we did it when in the middle of COVID, when in the middle of all the lockdowns, we were still managing to get things accomplished. And so you go back to June of 2020, we had drilled the first two wells, and we had discoveries on both of them with real nice percentages and hopeful of other noble gases. So that was real neat. And then we moved to well number 3, which was 70 miles to the west, then came back from there to well number 4, 5, 6, and 7, which are about halfway in between, not quite, but about 30 miles from the west. And our newest well that we just finished drilling and setting production casing and cementing it on was the Gunnar Dome. And that's about halfway between wells 1 and 2 and wells 4, 5, 6, and 7. So kind of spread out across a big chunk of territory there, but yet it's more or less what you have to do to stay absolutely on target. And that's what we've been blessed to be able to do thus far.
And the results from Gunnar Dome, I mean, we don't have the actual specific assays back, but I mean, these were very encouraging once again.
It was. We had some of the absolute highest, and when you're drilling with air and a mist, and so you have what's called a mass spectrometer. So it's just taking a sniff off of all the exhaust gas, everything's coming out. And so based on that, it is set up to look at every element on the periodic table. So you can see everything if it's there to be seen. So it's helpful. It's not a panacea to tell exactly what all the percentages are. However, when you see a lack of sulfur and you can see hydrogen come in, or nitrogen, or everything is compared to what the background level is when you start. So if you happen to be drilling for oil and gas and you find oil and gas, or like we find, you will always run into some kind of little minute methane or something somewhere along the line, and it's not really much. What we are looking at with it is down to like parts per million.
Yeah.
So it's real minute what you can see with it.
One of the questions I wanted to talk about, timelines always come up, and we have been very clear, I think, in every conversation. Yet I still read comments here and there about people saying there was promises made about timelines, and I'm like, every single conversation we've had, there's been zero promises about timelines. In fact, we talk about supply chain issues. We talk about trying to solve a lot of issues. And it isn't, I'll flat out say it isn't an excuse. I mean, in every company I talk to in every sector, there's supply chain issues. If someone's not cognizant of that, I don't know what to tell them. It isn't, it's reality.
It is. That is life right now.
That's just how we stand now. What can you tell us about the processing plant? Because of course, people want to see this plant up and running. They want to see production. That's what you see most people want to cheer about for whatever reason, whatever their intentions are. But where are you guys with the processing plant now?
Generon is assembling some of the other aspects. It came down to a small aspect that they thought they had covered originally, and they were promised it was not an issue, and it turned out to be an issue for them. Can't run it without that particular aspect. So it's like when they get there, they're going to get there. That being said, when we wrote the contract with Generon, we actually gave them an opportunity, because I really wanted the plant like back in April.
Yeah.
But that was my wish, my hope. And it didn't happen. It just, you cannot get things done as fast as you want. So then however, when we wrote the contracts on everything, if they had delivered it a lot sooner, they would have gotten some really large bonuses. Now they're into just trying to not lose anything. I really, in my gut, I'm willing to bet that they make phone calls and they find a way to get those other little parts there. Would be, and I'll be wrong, but if it does, it's going to cost them.
Yeah.
Because we have penalties written into the contract. And I know they are doing their absolute best to get it built within the time frame that they're not going to lose. It's not going to cost into their profits. But that's one thing that why you write that type of stuff into contracts. I just don't advertise how much and what it is. That's just, Andrew, it's just what I would consider would be good, sound business practice. It just, I don't know, a way I've always done business.
Sure.
So to me, it's not a big deal, but yet a lot of people, well, did you do this? And
yeah,
folks, that was covered. That's a long time ago.
Now, on that front too, with the say the plant, the power requirements. So there's been some movement on the needle there. There's some big upgrades there.
That's one thing that a lot of people, other plants that have been built are in areas where you have a lot of natural gas, and you have methane and propane, pentane, hexane, everything's coming down a pipeline. You just tag into it and you can run it. None of that is close. None. Zero. And what little bit is coming out of the ground, it's a very minute amount. And it's not enough to run a plant on. You can save it up, which is what we're going to do, and just have that to run the backup generation. But to make a plant be able to run it on solar without having to have 54 gigs of electrical storage and battery capacity so basically to take it from a $25 million battery storage plant, you've got to really start dropping that down and look at your different power storage and your power requirements. Because basically what this plant does, it's called it's a combination of pressure swing absorption and membranes. Both of those have been around. I'd say both of those have been around for 70 plus years. The pressure swing absorption, part of the way you accomplish that, you run a compressor. You run the pressure up, goes through, and as it goes through every step, you have to get it back up to a higher pressure. So basically, the majority of the power on the plant is run compressors. That's it, and they're not little compressors like you're putting in your garage to fill a tire on a car. You're talking about, because the overall pressure on the plant runs, the throughput runs at approximately 500 psi on a steady basis, and as it goes through the system, every 90, if you put in a hard 90, you decrease the flow. You don't decrease the pressure, but you decrease the actual flow by 50%. So if you put a whole bunch of 90s in it, so the way you get around that, you make it more an even, just a small bend, not a tight plumbing 90, so to speak. And so you try to limit that and design everything how it works with that in mind. So you still have to have volume, pressure and volume. And that's one of the things to make this plant and get it to where we could use solar and lithium ion batteries, and keep the cost down. That's what we did.
That's a big win. Let's talk a little bit about, before we jump into hydrogen, let's talk about some, like with the plant and with purity levels of helium, what can it produce? There was actually an interesting article out there kind of listing, like, a helium of 6 might be for semiconductors, whereas industrial might be somewhere around 4. What can this produce? I guess is the best way of putting it. Go ahead.
Fair question. The plant, I've tried to say this before, and apparently I failed, because I'll just say I failed to properly communicate. The plant is set to run on a wide range. You can't run 10 million cubic feet of gas at 6 nines. And actually, this plant is designed to run from 99. Actually, it can run as low as a 96.5 and to a high of 99.9999. So 6 nines.
Yes.
That's it. We can run grade 6.
Okay.
Which is what you use for semiconductors.
Yes.
Now, there's certain things within that market and for governmental uses and different aspects. It gives us an ability to run the plant for a specific customer's needs, which is a little bit different. The most plants, they set them up and they run them at that period.
Yes.
They don't.
That's it. Yes.
And then they'll take it and reprocess it on a much smaller plant to get it up to 6 nines and a 5 or 6 nines and an 8 for the ultra pure. Stuff that goes into like nuclear weapons, that type of stuff. Shielding. But
I guess no one has to be too much of a research analyst to go back through press releases and see that you have a payment association with the government of the U.S. So that's an interesting take into that. So this plant will be able to process that whole range. So you're getting anything from an industrial to, I think grade 5 is considered like sometimes top secret, like a lot of that type of use. And I think that clears that question as to the range of customers that you can have.
So it gives us the entire market.
There we go. So let's move on a little bit and talk about hydrogen, because you guys are primarily helium, but listen, if you get the gift of extra stuff, well, why not exploit it? It's great.
Well, that's part of the overall reason of, I knew we should have, for where I had hypothesized where we would find helium in a nitrogen-rich environment, not a CO2 environment. And you have to really understand all of the geology, and then you have to understand mineralogy and the chemistry behind minerals and how they interact. So it's, if you know that you are in an area that has all the unique uranium, 238, thorium 252, cesium, and lithium, you have the ability to see hydrogen being generated, helium-4 and helium-3. You can see the entire spectrum, because what they are actually an isotope of, and they're a stable isotope. So you get to see this. Now, hydrogen is not stable. Helium-3 is a stable isotope of hydrogen. So when you find a very pure form of hydrogen without sulfur, which is normal, because hydrogen has a half-life of 12.23 years. It automatically, it is so unstable. It wants to attract everything. That's why you have hydrogen, and it attaches to sulfide rocks, arsenic, salt, it's out there. It's also the most abundant atom in the universe. It's hydrogen, but it gets tied up very easily. So to have it in the form where we found it, it's because it's not necessarily being formed in the Earth's crust, same way, which is normally where you find hydrogen and helium. It's normally being manufactured in the Earth's crust, and it comes up through cracks and crannies, crevices, faults, and then you have to have trapping. Now, hydrogen behaves differently than helium. Hydrogen does not, it's not the exact same type of a trapping mechanism. Hydrogen, it's more like when it's moving from the point of the source that it's being generated at, it moves more like in a river. And you have to find where the dams are in the river, because on a river, water will go under the dam, around the dam, and most of it goes through the spillways or over the top. Hydrogen will go through the dam. That's the easiest way to
Interesting. Okay.
And people say, what?
Yeah.
And that's why containers that have hydrogen within them for testing and burning and different processes. If you fill a hydrogen container up, even though it's glass lined, you fill it up a year, you come back in a year, you will have lost approximately somewhere between 27 to 30% of it.
Wow, that's incredible.
It will go through literally the sides. It doesn't go through fast enough where you can see it, but then it also will leak out on the threads.
Yeah.
Where you have brass.
Yeah.
And they usually put Teflon tape and attach it. Now, helium, hydrogen, like on tanks, if they're not venting, that is where they lose it at. It's actually on the valves. And that's why the valves have to be changed out every time.
Oh.
So there's a lot of the other little side things, but hydrogen, you can't really pressurize it. It's too unstable. You can't put it into a regular tank. You normally would have put it into a tank that has a bladder, and you don't over pressurize it. It just kind of goes in the tank as it fills up, so that you're only like, at 1 atmosphere, depending on the altitude you're at, you're 14.283 pounds, per square inch of pressure. You don't run it over about 15 too. You just don't.
Yeah.
And what you do, and then you just use compressed air against that bladder to force it out. And so it keeps it a lot more stable. The other thing about hydrogen, when you can find those dams and you can produce it, interesting enough, like in Sao Paulo, Brazil, and here what we found, thus far, it's more like in Sao Paulo, at deeper horizons. It's a little bit different formation where it's being formed at. Well, a whole lot different. Once you have a decline curve started, And like in a normal methane gas field, depending on what it is, you can have within 90 days, you'll be producing at, say, half of what it initially started. And then it drops off to like a 5, a 2, or a 1%. So it's the decline curve. Hydrogen has about, what they have seen thus far is it has about a less than 1% decline curve. Doesn't start out as high either. So you don't have pressures, the same type of pressure. So how that works out long term for a field, you cannot just use the normal oil and gas accepted practices for figuring it out. What's the volumetrics? It doesn't work, just doesn't. And that's why I've been really hesitant. Everybody wanted, well, you have to put out exactly this. And I don't really want to.
Yeah.
And to people who originally really pushed me to do it, and I was silly to do it because I went against my own best knowledge on it. And it's like, no, it does not behave the same.
Yeah.
And so now there's getting to be a lot more confirmation of that, because in our case, where we will be stripping it out of a nitrogen environment, it has a different compressibility factors. I mean, I'm not trying to overcomplicate it, but just math, and we get tired of it's more math.
Yeah.
Sorry. That's all it is. It's just nature. That's the way it is. So the hydrogen, to deal with it, it has some other aspects to it. And probably the easiest way to transport it is turn it into ammonia.
Okay.
NH3.
Yeah.
NH3 is the symbol. So it's nitrogen and hydrogen. Well, we have nitrogen. Well, we breathe it, but we're going to be stripping it when we get that far.
Yeah.
It's there. It's compressed. It's stripped. So it makes it, there's some different aspects to it that as we work with, hopefully with Beam on that,
yes,
and exactly what it works, we will be doing more of a pilot project with them initially to figure it out. But then it's set to be able to, we're trying to put the entire agreement, the final agreements and joint operating agreements, they will vary by what jurisdiction we go to also, because there'll be varying amounts of it.
Yes. Well, that was the other question I wanted, because there's lots of speculations whenever we talked a little bit about it before, jurisdictions, when we talk about Beam Earth. I mean, we can go to Beam, you can look to see where they're at. I think we've actually talked about a certain location as well already. So what can we say? I'm going to flat out ask. I mean, where are some of these jurisdictions? Can we talk about it?
I'm not going to say.
I'm not going to say, but listen, we can once
but
again.
There's that's why I used the term jurisdiction.
Yeah, yes.
That is not that I didn't say in the next county.
No,
so it's like, we have signed non-disclosure, mutual non-disclosure agreements with a number of companies, and so I just am not. Number one, I'm bound by contract until we get that far. But no, hey, fair question. It doesn't bother me. You asked, though. That's fine.
While I'm at it, I'm going to take a big step backwards, because people's heads were probably flipping, because you see this all the time. You mentioned H3 and H4, and everyone will all get a flurry of emails if I don't say, "Oh, he brought it up. What can we talk about that?"
Just
no comment.
Don't get the cart before the horse.
Yes,
I'm using that as a comment to explain exactly how certain aspects are, why certain elements and isotopes are being formed.
Yes,
I'm not going to say exactly how they're being formed. I'll say the overall broad thing, but not quite yet.
Not yet.
I'm still no.
That's totally fine. I know that I'll get a million comments that they're like, listen, he mentioned the keywords there.
Yeah, don't get the cart before the horse.
Perfect. It's fair enough. And guess what? I mean, listen, that's all part of business. Now, speaking of other jurisdictions, you just spoke at a big conference in Southeast Asia. I believe you were the only North American representative. Tell me about that. What that was, how it went. And, maybe we'll get into some of the details about that conference and what your experience was like there.
Well, I was invited quite a while back to speak at the Asia Pacific Drilling Technology Conference and in Bangkok, Thailand. And it was basically the Society of Petroleum Engineers for Asia and the International Association of Drilling Contractors in Asia. It's for their biennial conference. So they only hold them every 2 years. And the real basis, what they were focus of their conference was well technologies to transition into as close into their goal is to actually Thailand's goal is to be net zero by 2050, net carbon. I don't know if that's going to be possible, but
yeah.
Hey, it's better to have a goal. You can never accomplish it.
Yes.
But it's like overall, that's what they have set. Other countries in Asia are trying to go along with that type of idea. And what they why one of the reasons we were selected is because of our plant that we were designing. And it's because it was what we weren't just giving lip service to an ESG policy, an environment and social governance. It's actually part and parcel to what we do. We're trying to be as responsible environmentally as we can. That includes trying to lower your carbon footprint. I mean, you still got to have carbon. I'm sorry, you need the oil. You need to have stuff.
Sure.
It just to have a global society. It's required. But that doesn't mean you can't try to improve. You should. Nor does it mean you have to just throw your hands up in the air and say, no, we're not going to. No, that's just asinine, quite honestly. And so we were recognized as, I'll just use some, because I have not seen the data from which two universities studies they came up with this. But they said, one of the presenters there referenced that with our plant being as close to net zero, this is the first processing facility in the world that is for all intents and purposes net zero carbon.
That's a big deal. Especially for Southeast Asia that has a lot of sunlight as well. Solar is a possibility and opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's like wind as well. I mean, it's an excellent model for someone to be encouraged by and go, listen, they're doing it already.
And we were, and because it goes back to how, the hydrogen exactly, what I just briefly was describing, how things are made, and it's obvious. And so I was talking to engineering people, and I had a lot of private meetings with different people, met with people who would represent the G7 and G20.
Yes.
So this was, I had a lot of private, very high level meetings with, and this is not a conference that you just walked in off the street to walk in.
No.
There was, security was extremely tight because you had the ministers of different countries there. You have the leadership for Thailand, leadership for other countries there. You didn't just wander in. Everybody had extreme. It was tighter than getting on an airplane. Put it that way.
I mean, I could make the argument that it used to be like lots of great news if someone's like, hey, we're going to New York to meet with XYZ funds and Goldman Sachs and all the list, and people go, ooh, that's very exciting. I would argue that being at an event with G7 countries and the real movers or shakers of focusing this energy transition and being in the room with them and being able to have some conversations and explain your approach and what you're doing is strictly on marketing is exceptionally valuable. That's exciting because they want to see that, and I'm sure they're probing to get as much info as possible out of you. How can we do this? How have you done it? Would it work here? What this? Mm-hmm. So, I mean, this is like kind of that pivotal point that we're sitting at. and you guys are close. I mean, we're close to production. I mean, people are always wanting that answer, and I think we're getting there. We're getting close.
Yep.
More will be revealed soon.
Yeah, that's it.
That's it. Well, that's
soon.
it. Yeah, soon. And you know what? And like I'm going to reiterate, because I saw comments about milestones and people saying dates in this. I was like, we've never spoken exactly about. We had hopes, like we'd hope to be in production here, but we'd always covered that with the absolute reality of that we face in the market today. That isn't an excuse. It's just simply the way the market is right now, and we're going to get through it. And I look at this company as a bit like a stored energy value, but it's stored value that's been accumulating that has not been unleashed. And I think, and I hope that's the case, that we'll see that if we're patient. And we've talked about patience before, which I don't have, but I think those that are patient and follow their long-term strategy and what they see as a long-form macro outlook in the world, we're right on track.
There are not great men and women in the world. Sorry, there's not. What there are great challenges. And it's ordinary men and women accepting those challenges and creating what appears to be great things while they're overcoming, they're refusing. So the way I put it back on when I closed, I said, so it comes down to, do you want to accept that challenge or not? We have. What do you want to do?
Excellent. Well, let's leave it at that. And we look forward to catching up with you real soon, Robert. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Appreciate it.